it has become central to their very understanding of the nature of reality, is that the physical universe is a holographic projection from non-locality.
So this three-dimensional universe is actually a projection from this two-dimensional field.
Energy world, exactly.
Yeah.
And that it has to be, in order for all of the other aspects of what they believe to be the nature of reality, there can only be the conclusion that the physical universe is a projection from this energy universe, energy verse, as I sometimes refer to it.
Welcome to Caritas Consciousness Project. I'm Gloria Quidu, and Caritas is dedicated to promoting the evolution of consciousness as the key to individual growth and global healing. So we draw from a wide assortment of both ancient wisdom and leading edge studies in science and consciousness, spirituality, healing, and philosophy. And we also have classes and study groups, which are also online. We have over 100 video recordings on our YouTube channel, Caritas Consciousness Project. So you can go there and see what we have for you. And they're also, you're also able to access them on our website, which is caritascenter.org. As a nonprofit organization, we rely on the support of our members and donors to keep us going, to keep Caritas going. And if you'd like to support our program, you can make a donation on our website, or you can become a member on our website also. And now let me introduce our guest speaker. Joseph Selbie is the author of paradigm-changing book called The Physics of Miraculous Healing, and 3 other books that I know of. And this is wonderful. A polymath, Joseph is known for creating bridges of understanding between the modern evidence-based discoveries of science and the timeless experience-based discoveries of the mystics. He's also the author of The Physics of God, Unification of Science and Religion, Breakthrough the Limits of the Brain, Neuroscientific Support for Spiritual Experience. And he has presented for us on both of those books as well. And The Yugas, which I hope he will present, and he has agreed to present for us sometime in the future, which is a factual look at India's tradition of cyclical history. He has presented at many conferences and has appeared on numerous programs, including the Chopra Well with Deepak Chopra, Coast to Coast with George Noory, Gaia's Open Minds with Regina Meredith, and Buddha at the Gas Pump with Rick Archer. He was nominated Trailblazer of the Decade by Om Times magazine and appears with Elizabeth Rome in the 2014 docudrama Finding Happiness. A dedicated Kriya Yoga meditator for over 50 years, he has taught yoga, meditation, and universal experiential spirituality throughout the US and Europe. In 1975, Joseph became a member of Ananda, a spiritual movement inspired by the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda, author of Autobiography of a Yogi. Welcome, Joseph, and I'm so happy to have you here again. Thank you for coming.
Well, thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
Good. It's a great pleasure for us too. So why don't we start with What inspired you initially to explore this intersection of physics and healing? Did it arise from your own personal healing journey, or did your original interest begin with science, or how did this come about?
It's kind of hard to say which came first. I've always had a deep background in science. I was raised in a family where science was the lingua franca, the common language of all discussions. And as I like to joke, dinner table conversation always required footnotes. You couldn't just get away with saying that something was true. You had to back it up with some sort of fact.
Mhm.
So at times I found that amusing or alternatingly frustrating, but it really grounded me in science. And I went into my college years expecting to continue in a career in science. But somewhere in mid college years, I began to have more and more spiritual experiences that really begged to me a different approach, a different understanding of how the world worked, of what the nature of reality really was, because the basics of science, even today, let alone when that was happening in my college years, just don't support consciousness as an independent reality. They don't support subtle energy for the most part. And so I've always wanted to find that support in science for what I know from personal experience to be true about the more subtle aspects of who we are.
Mhm.
How that all flowed eventually into medicine and healing in a large measure was because I've always been interested in alternative healing for myself. I've always gone to alternative practitioners rather than regular doctors. I'm married to a homeopath who is, very gifted, empathic healer herself. So I'd always been very interested in that, and saw an opportunity, saw maybe a need to try to explain to people how it is possible today to find support for subtle healing, for miraculous healing that didn't exist even 50 years ago. And it's largely found in the sort of frontier disciplines of physics that have built upon Einstein's relativity theory and Bohr's quantum mechanics, quantum physics. And then string theory came along, and now we have M theory, which is kind of a leading expression of that discipline of string theory. But essentially, there is a lot more foundation now in physics, especially
Mhm.
for the possibility of extraordinarily rapid healing. And as a corollary, there's more foundation for the notion that there is no incurable disease,
Mhm.
that we get both of those opposite convictions from modern medicine, that certain conditions are incurable and that certainly really rapid physical change is impossible. But they are possible. Ultra rapid physical change has been demonstrated and verified by doctors who were closely involved in a case where it occurred. And more, there are many cases of radical remission from what are normally considered to be terminal illnesses, especially cancer.
Mm.
So if there's verification for it, then how is it possible? It can't just be some unexplainable freak and let's all move on and ignore it. There has to be some science. Probably everyone has heard of Einstein's discovery of the what's known now as relativity theory, that says all matter is really an illusion and that it's really made out of energy.
Mhm.
But that discovery, which was primarily to begin with one of physics equations proving it, was all based on the fact of one anomaly. And that anomaly was that the speed of light was constant in a vacuum, regardless of the speed of its origin. So I won't take the time to go all the way into how that was so much of an anomaly, but it became the basis for the overturning of what is now known as classical physics by relativity. Just that one anomalous fact that light travels at a constant rate. So I felt that it was just glaringly obvious that miraculous healing is a similar kind of anomaly. If science, particularly modern medicine, can't explain how someone's entire body can change in minutes, then there's something wrong with the science. So that made me dive deeper and deeper into modern physics, which does have support for it.
Mhm. Yeah. And I sometimes get the impression that doctors don't like these anomalies because it threatens their science, their version of medicine, right? That these things, but you talk about in your book that although mainstream science still sees the body as like a molecular machine model, you point out that there's a serious disconnect between the number of protein cells needed, for instance, to be produced each day to keep the body healthy, and the maximum speed at which, according to science, molecules can be produced. That it doesn't jive, right? They have no explanation for that. And also that science has no explanation for how the molecular mechanisms of the body are coordinated. What coordinates them? How does quantum physics address this problem?
Well, quantum physics gives us a starting point on which is built string theory and M theory. But the key thing that quantum physics revealed is that not only is matter really energy in a stable pattern, but matter can change. The energy that makes up matter can change from behaving like matter to behaving like waves of energy. It can go back and forth. This is matter energy duality. And that there is the still fairly mind-bending discovery of what's known as the observer paradox, which has been, tested and proven over and over, literally thousands of times, perhaps millions of times by now, that the energy that makes up matter only behaves like matter when it is observed by an intelligent observer. So not only is there this duality, but our very conscious involvement in it is a requirement for it to behave like matter. And when it's not observed, all that energy behaves like waves, formless waves of energy. So
Possibility.
this is a very different view of the physical body than we get from modern medicine or classical physics. And what it opens the door to is understanding that the physical body, because it too is made of this Jekyll Hyde kind of energy, is therefore very much more mutable, very much more changeable than the picture we get from classical physics and modern medicine. So string theory takes that kind of fundamental view of reality a step farther. So, and by fundamental view, I mean that there really is no such thing as matter per se. Matter is energy behaving like matter, but it is always fundamentally energy. But what string theory took us to is the appreciation that when the energy that can behave like matter is instead behaving like waves of energy, it's not even in this universe. It's not in the physical world. When the energy that is behaving like waves of energy behaves that way, it's in what's known as non-locality. And non-locality is a rather strange term to describe another reality that doesn't behave locally, thus non-local. We're used to local behavior. Local behavior is what we perceive through the senses. So that's said to behave in a local fashion. But when we get things like entanglement and the observer paradox, then that energy starts to behave non-locally. And not only does it behave non-locally, which might give you the impression that it's still here, but it's just behaving in a weird way. It's actually not here at all. It's actually in another subtle level, if you will, or realm of pure energy that is interpenetratingly connected to our more familiar physical universe, but is distinct. And the key thing for understanding why this is of importance to understanding the potential of healing is that the subtle energy that is this formless energy that has been manifesting as the physical body can, in an instant, form the physical body and back and forth. That we have this, constant dance that we're doing between non-local subtle energy that makes up our self and the local energy that makes up the physical body, or what we often think of as ourself, but is the physical manifestation of ourself. And that we always have, as I like to put it, 1 foot in the physical world and 1 foot in non-locality, or 1 foot in the physical universe and 1 foot in the heavens. That we are always multidimensional beings. So this takes us again a step farther than quantum physics. But there's yet another step that is taken by M theory. And M theory, I like to think of as the furthest edge of the frontier of modern science. And what M theory adds to this notion that we are multidimensional, that there is the physical universe and there's the non-local energy world, is that the non-local reality of which we are a part creates
Which
and
can also be,
sustains.
which can also be seen as the spiritual dimension, what we commonly
Yes,
think of as the spiritual dimension when we talk about non-locality. That's another way to look at it, right?
yes,
Yeah,
yes. So I'm giving you this picture of reality in the language of physics. But
right.
what I really love about M theory is that what it describes is a subtle, pure energy, luminous reality that we inhabit in our subtle energy bodies and which is intimately connected to our physical bodies. And this is how subtle spiritual teachings, experiential spiritual teachings describe reality. And the two are very, very congruent.
Yeah.
What M theory adds to it is the notion that we are not only this multidimensional, have this multidimensional relationship, but we are part of a holographic dynamic. Now, again, this comes from M theory. They're not looking at spiritual teachings and saying, that suggests to me that maybe we're looking at a holographic relationship. No, M theory doesn't even relate at all to spiritual teachings. There may be M theorists who find the connection irresistible, but M theory is like the rest of science, looking for some, in the case of physics especially, some mathematical evidence for how the subtler pure energy non-locality works. And one of the things that they discovered and has become central to M theory, it's not just kind of a fringe thought that they have. It has become central to their very understanding of the nature of reality, is that the physical universe is a holographic projection from non-locality.
So this three-dimensional universe is actually a projection from this two-dimensional field.
Pure energy world, exactly.
Yeah.
And that it has to be, in order for all of the other aspects of what they believe to be the nature of reality, there can only be the conclusion that the physical universe is a projection from this energy universe, energy verse, as I sometimes refer to it. And what this means more personally is that we have a energy body. We have a subtle energy body, which in spiritual teachings we would call a spirit body, an astral body, subtle body. That is the hologram that projects our physical body. It's the holographic projection that is the physical body comes from this pure energy body that provides the template for the physical body. So I find this amazingly astonishing because it is such a central part of spiritual teachings, right?
Yes, yes. And both disease and healing happen first on this etheric level. And then it manifests in the physical.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so it is a marvelous support for spiritual teachings when
Yes.
you look at the frontiers of physics, because it's as I say, it's a pillar of what they believe to be the nature of reality. So that's really the first part of my book, is to, you know, kind of spin that out so that people can get a grip on why science, far from not supporting extraordinarily rapid physical change and unlimited healing, actually support it extremely well.
Yes. When I first read about quantum entanglement and non-locality, I felt it went a long way toward explaining the process of healing at a distance, because the subtle energy, when it's delivered by intention, transcends time and space, in the sense that it's not diminished by distance, and it's immediately available to the person who is receiving it, unlike electromagnetic energy,
Right.
which does diminish with space and does depend on time, right?
Yeah, because in non-locality, in the astral regions, there is no space, there is no distance, there is no time as we think of it, because it's two-dimensional. Space and distance and time are the result of three dimensions. And so you take away one of those dimensions and you take away space and distance, and therefore some relationships of time. But it also means everyone at an astral level is connected. So when I'm praying for you or you're praying for me, there is no distance between us. That I'm experiencing what you're praying instantly and immediately within my spiritual body. Mm-hmm. Now, what I think is even of more significance to all of us is to understand that our effect on our subtle energy body is more powerful than any other influence. That in particular, how our emotions, our beliefs, and our connection to spirit shape our subtle energy body, which in turn is what is projecting the physical body. So when you make any kind of change in your subtle energy body, it is instantly affecting, sustaining, creating your physical body. We don't tend to see it because, one, we tend to spend most of our time perceiving through the senses, and so our senses don't reveal a lot of the subtleties that are going on even in the physical body, let alone in our astral body. But if you could see it, if you could see the effect of your emotions that are reverberating through your energy body, you would see your physical body, vibrate in the same way, and you would see positive or negative effects on every cell in your body as a result of that reverberation. So if it's a negative emotion, you're going to see crucial functions of every cell be interfered with. So if it's a brief moment, just a moment of frustration, It will reverberate through your physical body, but then your physical body will reset, if you will, once that emotion passes. But when we harbor long-term negative emotions, that same effect continues in each and every one of our cells by interrupting essential functions to the point where cells and tissues will break down. So doctors know what, typical medical doctors know what diabetes is. It's the breakdown of our pancreas cells that create insulin. And they've come up with treatments for it, which are basically to give you artificial insulin. But medicine doesn't really know why your cell stopped being able to create insulin. And this is true of almost all disease pathologies. They know what happens once the cell breaks down, but they don't know why the cells break down. So that is why emotion is such a powerful thing in regard to our health, not only our well-being and our the way in which we experience life, but it's a very powerful effect on our every cell in our body. So we're in charge of that. We're the ones who are entertaining the negative emotions, or more to the positive, obviously, entertaining health creating, harmony creating, positive emotions. We're really driving that and are much more responsible at a fundamental level for our health than we tend to think. Belief is even more astonishing.
Yes, tell us the story about the man who had cancer all over his body and was given that medication that
Oh, right. Yes.
So
that's a great story. It's both a interesting story that demonstrates the power of belief, our own deeply held beliefs over our body. And it's also simultaneously a cautionary tale about what we believe in. Yes. So the story was told by a doctor, Dr. West, who had a patient named Mr. Wright, who had lymphoma. And he had been in the hospital for some time. He was getting very close to dying. But Mr. Wright was somewhat of an optimist, and he was reading all the medical journals and studying his condition of lymphoma, looking for some way in which he could be helped. And he came across the fact that in the very hospital where he was a patient, there was going to be a trial for a chemotherapy drug called cribiazin. And he asked Dr. West if he could be included in the trial. And initially, Dr. West didn't want to include him in the trial because he wasn't in their optimum category. He was basically too far gone. But he finally allowed Mr. Wright to talk him into it. So come the day when the trial was to begin, Dr. West injected Mr. Wright, along with everybody else in the trial, on a Friday afternoon, went home, came back to the hospital Monday morning, and Mr. Wright was up. He was walking around. Tumors that had been visible, as described as the size of oranges, on his chest and body had disappeared. Fluid in his lungs had all gone away, and he had energy. And within a couple of days, he checked out of the hospital, flew himself home in his own plane because he was a pilot. Mm. And Dr. West was astonished, not only at the amazing rapidity of it, but because none of the other patients who were in the trial showed any improvement. But, he just kind of chalked that up to the strangeness of medicine in general. However, about a month later, or 2 months later, Mr. Wright read another article in another medical journal that said cribiazin had been proving to be useless. And this threw Mr. Wright into a tailspin, and he collapsed back into his old condition. The tumors returned, fluid filled his lungs again. He went back into the hospital and once again was at death's door. Dr. West was amazed and intrigued, and he decided to try something which today would probably be considered unethical. But he told Mr. Wright that while it was true that cribiazin was proving ineffective, there was a new and improved cribiazin that was going to come to the hospital within a few days, and that if he was willing, Dr. West would give him an injection of this new and improved chemotherapy drug. Mr. Wright's natural optimism ballooned up again. He was looking forward to getting another injection, and this time he was the only patient that Dr. West injected because there was no new and improved cribiazin. And he gave him a saline injection, a placebo injection. Same thing happened. Within 2 days, all of his condition disappeared again. All of the tumors vanished, fluid in his lungs went away, his energy returned, and once again, checked out of the hospital, went home. But alas, for Mr. Wright, he read yet another article. I can see you all groaning over this. That said, it definitively and absolutely cribiazin is no longer being even tested, let alone used. And this time, Mr. Wright fell back into his condition, and 2 days later, he died. So no one else who got the drug in any of the tests had anything like the response that Mr. Wright had. And it's just too perfect not to think that it was his deep and enthusiastic belief in the possibility of it that both cured him and eventually killed him because it didn't work. So that's the cautionary part of the tale, which is he didn't believe in something that had unlimited potential. He believed in something that turned out to have no potential. So we do this to ourselves all the time. We don't do it as radically or as dramatically as Mr. Wright did, but in very deep ways, the level of health we have, either good health or poor health, is deeply a reflection of what we believe, one, is possible in general, but more specifically, is true for us now as an individual. So when we get, if we get, and heaven forfend that any of us do, but when individuals come down with something like cancer or are diagnosed with something that's considered to be a very serious disease or a terminal condition, their belief of what that portends and what that means takes over and will, in fact, cause them to die if that's their conviction. It's extraordinarily and in a way scarily powerful how strong our beliefs are. Let me tell you another story, sort of a story about another individual. This time having to do with the world of multiple personality disorder. And I'm sure most of you know that people suffering from this condition move through different personalities that can be very, very different one from the other. But what is less known is that it's often the case that when the person moves from one personality to another, that they experience physiological changes. They can have scars that come and go. They can have moles that come and go. They can have different conditions of their eyes, even to the extent that they can have different colored irises in different personalities. There is a further story that I find the most remarkable, most extraordinary, about a woman who came into treatment for multiple personality disorder as a completely blind person. She was blind in every personality. But as she progressed in her therapy, one by one, 9 out of 10 personalities began to be able to see to varying degrees. But only one sort of stubbornly remained completely blind. Now, that's extraordinary, but it's even more extraordinary when you realize that, let's say, personality 1 can mostly see. When they move into, let's say, personality 10 that can't see at all, they become blind in minutes, and vice versa.
Do you know if she had been blind by birth, from birth?
I don't know that, but I suspect it. But lest you think this is, psychosomatic, which is kind of sort of saying the same thing if you think about it. But if you think it's something, some trick of the brain, they ran tests on all of her personalities. But when she was being tested in the completely blind personality, they would put the usual sensor net on her head, and then they would shine really bright light directly in her eyes. And there would be absolutely no neural response anywhere in her brain, let alone the visual cortex at the back of the brain. This is impossible to fake.
Yeah.
This is not her thinking she's blind in some way, but isn't really. She's blind. So each of those 10 personality believes completely in the degree to which they can or cannot see. And that belief actually determines the degree to which they can see or not see. So we hold the same kind of beliefs. We just don't go in and out of different sets of beliefs in order to see it or witness it. Unfortunately, for multiple personality sufferers, they don't witness it either, because when they switch into a personality, as far as that personality is concerned, they are that person. There are no other personalities. And it takes, years of therapy for them to even believe that they could have be sharing this body with other personalities. But without that, their conviction of who and what they are is absolute. So that's the way we are. Our conviction of who and what we are is absolute. And what it means for us in practical purposes, in health purposes, is that if we have some kind of health condition, negative health condition that we don't like, that is interfering with our life or having implications of getting seriously worse, we are at some deep level accepting that that is possible and that it's happening for us, which opens the door to the reality that if we choose to, we can change what we believe. Now, it's not easy. It's not simply reading a book, writing it down, and saying, oh, I don't believe that anymore. Because we believe at a level that is kind of deeper than conscious. But we can build new and positive beliefs that will sort of push out those deeper than conscious negative beliefs. And
neuroplasticity.
Yes, there's neuroplasticity. And then there's just what we're embracing on a soul level, on a subtle energy body level.
Mm-hmm.
And if you read the stories of people who have overcome cancer, terminal cancer, or other terminal health conditions, if you read what they go through, one of the key things they do go through is learning and developing the belief that they can heal, that is central to them being able to overcome and have the radical remission or the extraordinary recovery that they have. Other key things to overcoming these kind of serious illnesses are, in fact, overcoming negative emotions, getting a realistic acceptance of not only that they had and maybe still have negative emotions, but that they caused them. They embraced them. They brought them into their lives. Now, the things they were reacting to, they may have had really, really challenging, difficult lives, which all of us would probably be sympathetic to the fact that they reacted to those lives with negative emotions, which makes it even more challenging for them to accept and believe that they were making a choice to react negatively. Many people confronted with this possibility or even this concept that they could be causing their own negative emotions get angry, they get mad, they don't want anything to do with this view of things. But those who are in the minority who can see how it's possible and can accept that they need to consciously try to release negative emotions, but more importantly, build up positive emotions, those are the ones who, along with changing their beliefs and connecting to their soul nature, connecting to spirit, are able to overcome serious illnesses. Now, if we don't have serious illnesses, as you know, is true for most of us, those three pillars, our emotions, our beliefs, and our connected to spirit, are also the foundation of our continuing good health. And if you want to be healthier and you want to have more energy, or you have troubling kind of minor illnesses, the best way to overcome those is not outward treatments, but working on your own emotional nature, working on your own convictions about what your health is based on. And most deeply, connecting to spirit. This is the strongest one, because by connecting to spirit, you're connecting to the joy and the peace and the harmony that is your nature. And when you're experiencing those, your energy body, your subtle energy body, is harmonized, it's energized, it's the opposite of the negative emotion. It's supporting your physical body with higher effective functions in every cell, so that every cell is functioning at its optimum in all whatever that cell's job is, whether it's creating insulin or the particular proteins that create digestive enzymes, et cetera, when your body is functioning at a high vibration with a positive energy, all of those functions in the physical body improve. More fundamentally, I think the greatest power it has is that when you connect to your true nature, your spiritual nature, feel that presence of spirit, fundamentally changes what you believe you are. Because the beliefs that are limiting, that cause people to embrace a limited view of whether they can heal from something or not, are all fundamentally based on the notion that we're just atoms and molecules, that we are nothing more than a molecular machine. And you can read books about the fact that you're not just a molecular machine, right? You can read books that are very inspiring and will help you change that basis of belief, but nothing changes it more rapidly and more deeply than connecting to spirit yourself. That, there's the old saw about, seeing is believing. Well, take it to another level. Experiencing is believing. And when you experience spirit daily and you know yourself, you don't just think, when you know yourself to be more than just a physical body, then that overturns the more limiting beliefs that you have been carrying around about who and what you are, and brings up to kind of the more effective surface of your reality and keep you healthy, keep you energized, keep you positively feeling in your emotions. So those three things, emotions, beliefs, and connecting to spirit, are your soul powers. You have other soul powers, but those are your soul powers where your health is concerned. And you can be in charge. You can really make the effort to see what they're doing. Check in. What are my emotions doing? What are my beliefs doing? How deeply am I connecting to spirit? That's the latter part of my book, is really lots of practices, exercises, from meditation to affirmations to energization exercises, that are methodical ways of changing emotions, beliefs, and connecting to spirit. Some real way to make it happen in your life. Now, I'm sure all of you would be surprised if it isn't true. All of you are doing some of these things, but I invite you to take a look at what else is on offer in the book that might inspire you to do more and better.
I think that meditation is really key, because when we have direct experience with with our true nature through meditation, or through a near-death experience, through a spontaneous awakening, it takes care of the other two.
Right.
Right? Because our emotions are uplifted, and our whole sense of who we are, our belief system, our belief of who we are, is completely, transformed.
Yeah, it's fundamentally transformed.
Yeah.
the negative beliefs, the negative emotions are often um, erased. I mean, I don't want to make it sound like they're suppressed,
No, no.
but they don't get activated easily any longer. Your brain is rewired, and you're far less subject to falling into those kind of negative patterns. Many near-death experiencers talk about returning to their lives, and even though they're living the same life that they left, many, stay in the same marriages, obviously have the same kids, even stay in the same jobs, but they say it's as if they're living it from a completely different perspective.
Yes.
They see life in a more positive way. They see the purpose in life that came with that deeper experience in the heavens, etc. So it's hard to, and I'm saying this to be amusing. It's hard to concoct your own near-death experience. So I really recommend meditation instead. But what I think we gain from reading about those experiences or talking to people or listening to people who have had them is we get inspired in our own determination to have as deep of that kind of experience as we can through the tools that we have. And I agree. I think meditation is the number one. If you don't do
Yes.
any of the exercises that I offer in the book, start with meditation.
I
That
think
will have the deepest effect.
Your step-by-step instructions about meditation to someone who is not familiar with it, I thought were so clear and so well done, so helpful.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I really recommend that. So what advice, since most likely it's a very new book, so most likely most of the audience who are and will be watching this, many of them may not be on a regular meditation kind of course. Would you maybe mention some of the advice that you give to someone new to meditation to begin to use it effectively for towards the goal of self-healing?
Well, I would say first is find a technique. I offer in my book the technique called Hung Saw. You're probably all also familiar with mindfulness meditation and other techniques. It is very helpful to practice a technique, because if you're like me and like most people, the first time you've sat down to meditate, or maybe still when you sit down to meditate, you find the most challenging thing is to get the mind to slow down and to be able to be present and to sit still. Techniques help a lot with getting you through that restlessness. So I really recommend practicing a technique. And then many people have told me over the years, or have started a sentence with, well, I tried to meditate. And, the story is very familiar. Is that they found it to be challenging. They found that what they had hoped for, which was to, feel really relaxed and peaceful and calm and all of their issues to just kind of dissolve away, didn't happen, and they were disappointed, and they would conclude perhaps that meditation wasn't for them, or that they just aren't the kind of person who can meditate. I think I'm more sorry to hear that perhaps than any other thing that people tell me.
Mhm.
That because they're sort of turning away from one of the key things that can transform their lives.
Right.
So, what I like to stress for people who are starting out is not only pick a technique and learn how to do it, but be methodical in uh, having a regular time every day to meditate, and take the time to think thoroughly and clearly, when is that going to be? How long is it going to be? Where in my home am I going to do it? Um, is there something else that I routinely do that's already in that slot? And if it is, what am I going to do about it? Be realistic about the fact that most adults already have every moment of their day full of things. And that's one of the reasons why it's difficult to add meditation to it. It's because you're competing with already established habits that have, for better or worse, neural connections that make them happen automatically. So be realistic about what you're up against. Um, and because of that, think about what you can do to make your meditation time as pleasant as possible. Make it inviting. Um, Play music that you like to hear just before you meditate. Um, if you like scents, activate some sort of scent. Whatever you find to be a pleasing experience, kind of wrap that around your meditation time so that when you're building new neural circuits to help you meditate, they're being strengthened by activities that are already pleasant to you, that you already like. Be prepared for even a 10-minute a day commitment to meditation to experience headwinds, that there are going to be times when you don't want to do it. And it's often that you don't want to do it because some other habit you already have is pulling you away from it, that is more attractive. Except the fact that it's going to take you a little bit. I use the example often that it's like riding a bicycle up to a plateau. So you have to exercise will to get up to the plateau. But once you get to the plateau, it's flat, it's easier going. And the analogy fits with the fact that for the first few weeks, even few months, this is going up, riding up to the plateau. And it's the time when your brain is creating new circuits to support this new habit. But once you get to the point where those habits are supported by neural circuits, then even if you forget, and this is the great news, even if you forget, you'll be reminded by something that, oh, it's meditation time. And you will feel positive about it. Go, oh, great. Yes, this is when I meditate. And it starts to be a supportive habit that is not all about will and determination. And you'll like it more and more and more. And then it becomes easier to extend it, do it longer, do it a couple of times a day. All of these things are great. But if you don't already have a basis for that, start with something manageable, be determined to do it. Don't take on a bunch of other habits at the same time. It's a tendency we all have, sort of the New Year's Eve syndrome, where you get enthusiastic and you decide, I'm going to change all of these things. I'm going to change this part of my diet. I'm going to get exercise. I'm going to start meditating. And it's laudable that we get into those moods, and it's good that we at least have them. But better to be maturely realistic about how much you can change at once, and just pick one of those, not all of them, to change, and wait until it gets in the mental groove of neural circuits, and then revisit the other things that you wanted to do as well. But just don't underestimate how determined you have to be to start any new positive habit, whether it's meditation or anything else. And stick with it until it becomes just a natural part of you that you like doing.
Yeah.
So I don't know where we are on time, but we were talking at one point about question and answer.
Yeah.
More than happy to stay on as long as needed to answer your questions, but I don't want to go way over your normal schedule.
Thank you. Well, before we have a little time before we open up for questions, and I'd like to ask you, you mentioned the connection between deep states of meditation and the body's energy field. Can you elaborate how meditation impacts these energy fields and promotes healing? The frequency of our energy?
Well, your energy body, your subtle energy body, which is, interpenetratingly connected to the physical body, because it's non-local and because it's pure energy, is very changeable. And in fact, if you could see it, you would notice that when you have a positive emotion, which you can see, you can feel, we all can feel our emotions, but if you could see it as well, you would see positive emotions expanding your aura, expanding your energy body. You would see areas of ill health, of habitual negative health conditions would be changed. Psychics see ill health as kind of dark areas in your aura. If you could see it, you would see a positive emotion sort of transmuting it, lifting it in color, even getting it completely out of your aura. If we could see these things, we would not be messing around with negative emotions at all, because it would be so obvious to us. It's just the fact that we rarely do see them. We feel them. We don't like negative emotions. That's kind of the fundamental reason why we think of them as negative emotions. But it's easy to not be aware that they are also harming us physically in our health. So this happens with beliefs. Positive beliefs have that harmonizing, expanding, healing effect on the subtle energy body. Connecting to spirit, just in a way, you could say it's like turning the dimmer switch on a light bulb up. It just gets brighter, fuller, stronger. And this is because we are essentially that. We are that infinite spirit. But unless we are putting our awareness on it, and this is why meditation is so important, is because meditation is fundamentally a tool to make us more aware of spirit. Unless we do that, we don't necessarily turn that knob up. It's as bright or as dim as it has been for some time based on our habit of perception and how we experience ourselves. So all of those things have a direct and powerful positive effect on the subtle energy body, which, if it happens immediately, has an immediate effect on the physical body. If it happens slowly, it will have a slow effect on the physical body, but it will have a definite correlated effect on the physical body from whatever we are causing our subtle energy body to experience.
Okay. How do you envision the future of medicine evolving with the inclusion of quantum healing concepts?
I think what we're seeing is that more and more people, 50 years ago, alternative medicine wasn't even a concept. It wasn't even dignified by anyone with the notion that there was an alternative medicine.
Yeah. Right.
There was medicine, and then there were all these weird things. But in, I don't know, pick a date, the 80s, the 90s, there was a growing mainstream acceptance of there being this kind of family of other practices that could be put together conceptually as alternatives. And within those are energy healing. And within those are the need to heal our emotions. Within those are meditation and connection to spirit. All the things I've been talking about are kind of woven into that general concept of alternative healing. And the number of people who are embracing alternative healing is rapidly growing.
Yes, I remember I think it was the early 90s or late 80s, there was a study done by the New England Journal of Medicine. They set out to show that the people who engage or who go to alternative practitioners had less education and were less educated than people who didn't, who just relied on mainstream medicine. And what the study ended up showing was the exact opposite, that it was the higher level of education a person had, the more likely they were to go to alternative practitioners. And to their credit, they published the study. So that was kind of an eye opener, I remember.
Yeah, that's a great one. I'll remember that.
Yeah. I don't remember the exact year, but it was either late 80s or early 90s. Early 90s was when I read about it, but I don't remember exactly when the study came out.
Yeah. Well, I think it's just going to keep steadily growing because if for no other reason, but this is the most important reason, it works.
Yeah.
And it actually works better than standard mainstream medicine in many ways. I think that what I envision in a future, I would hesitate to think when that future is going to be, is that there will be a practical appreciation for what heals us more effectively in the alternative modes and what will continue to be useful in the traditional medical mode. Now, I was in an automobile accident about 3 years ago, and I got flown into a hospital in a helicopter and spent a couple of weeks in the hospital. And I was extremely impressed by and grateful for modern trauma care.
Mhm.
I mean, they know how to keep people alive long enough for their own natural healing powers to kick in. That may be something that never goes away as a need, right?
Right.
They
Yeah.
continue to have accidents. And so uh, I can see in an ideal 100 years from now where they all coexist and
Mm.
there's no longer a kind of a battle between them.
Yeah, I think where alternative medicine really excels or is most useful is with chronic conditions. You know, um, I I have been an energy medicine practitioner and teacher for many years, and I always say, if I break my leg, I'm not going to go to an energy healer. I'm going to go to the hospital, right?
Yep.
So, yeah,
Yeah. And it is exactly what you say. It's the chronic conditions that are in many ways chronic but not life-threatening
right,
that modern medicine rarely can do much good.
right,
With chronic conditions that are, verging on terminal, they can do extraordinary things that keep the person alive and may keep them alive long enough for them to heal themselves.
yeah,
But I would rarely, I can't imagine myself actually recommending to someone who's been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, unless I know them really well and unless I know that they have deep belief in the power of alternative healing, I would never recommend that they ignore
no.
what modern medicine can do for them.
Well,
But
that's
if
why
they're
it's called
somewhere in
complement.
between, I would say work on your emotions, your beliefs, and your connection to spirit first.
Mhm.
Give that the most of your attention and take advantage of what modern medicine might be able to help you with in combination.
Right. That's why they call it complementary
Right.
medicine, right? Because it goes it complements whatever other treatment the person might be having. And in many cases, I know, with chemotherapy, for instance, it can mitigate some of the some of the untoward side effects. So
Yeah.
that you're still getting the chemo, but you're not feeling quite as bad, things like that.
Yeah. In a practical way, it can complement. Um, I think in just a pragmatic way, I hope none of you are suffering from terminal cancer, and I'm going to get myself in trouble here, but I think what it can do is keep you from dying long enough
Mm-hmm.
that you can bring to bear deeper levels of healing. A lot of the statistics you hear about um, a certain chemotherapy treatment has a 50% effectiveness, but, and I'm just picking that number out of a hat. But if you look at it carefully, what you discover is that it has a 50% effectiveness of keeping people alive for another year
Mm.
or another 2 years, right? It rarely heals anybody.
Mm-hmm.
It can keep you long enough that if you keep you well long enough or alive long enough that you can use these other techniques. And that's the story of all of the people that had radical remission from cancer, is most of them start with the medical model and they're in chemotherapy, but they don't want to buy into the limit of I have 1 year to live or 2 years to live. And so they take charge.
Yeah.
And once they take charge, then modern medicine becomes the complementary piece. And the core is taking charge of their own health.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's open up the conversation to whoever might have a question. Okay, Jeff, you raised your hand.
Hello. Yeah, I enjoyed the talk today. And, I believe that there can be spiritual healing. I was just wondering if you have any idea in your theories about where all the negativity is coming from in this world. I mean, there's so much bad news. And if you look at history, there's been a lot of it. I mean, you could say, well, we're all thinking negatively. But it's been around for so long. I mean, do you have any part of your theory that addresses that?
Well, you're asking a question that has a lot of depth to it. I don't want to go too deep that it takes me half an hour to answer you, but I would say we're all caught up in the world, but not necessarily as individuals. But the world is caught up in a reactive way of living. And people are reacting to their personal circumstances, they're reacting to the state of the world. And this has been around for probably thousands of years. I believe that there were higher ages in the past, and in those higher ages, one of the hallmarks of them would be that people didn't live reactively, that they lived more from the center of their being. But in the sort of realistic time frame of the last 1,000 or 2 years, I would say the reactive tendency of people just gets passed on from generation to generation, and that the core of that reactive process is brought on by people wanting the world around them to make them happy. They're wanting their source of joy to be because somebody loved them, or they had a satisfying job, or they had enough money to be able to do what they wanted with. And that these assumptions that all of those things are what are going to make us happy are the root cause of people reacting unhappily when they don't get them. So we're trained. I mean, my parents were reactive. Everybody I knew growing up was reactive, and people would get angry if things didn't go the way they wanted them to go. It's a very deeply held and indoctrinated way of living our lives. So it is changeable on a worldwide level, but not quickly. But it is realistically changeable on a personal level. We are, as you say, at sea in a world of negativity, but we don't have to be caught up in it. We don't have to be subject to its effects. We can live positively, lovingly, peacefully, harmoniously, joyfully by living from within, where all of those experiences actually reside. They don't reside outside of ourselves. So it's always a choice for us individually. Is the world going to change quickly? I don't think so. I wish I could say yes, but I don't think so.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
It's sometimes I think that it can change quickly if critical mass is achieved in terms of consciousness. And I think there are more and more people waking up. We don't hear it in the news. And we're so tied into evaluating the state of the world through, the media. And the media doesn't deliver this side of things, so it's hard to know. But I often think of the Berlin Wall and how suddenly that came down,
Right.
things
Right.
like that.
Yeah, I think we're improving the world. I think the direction things are going in is slowly towards higher consciousness, and that also including a more harmonious world in which, even if you're caught up in a reactive fashion, you have a greater chance of having a nice life to live in reaction to, if that's making any sense. That I think things are improving in that way, even though it might not seem that way. If we look back to like the turn of the 20th century and compare that to now, there have been significant societal improvements. So I do think that the changes have been good. I mean, imagine every time I say this as an example, part of me winces, but in the early 20th century, Black people could be lynched in the United States, and there would be no repercussion on those who did it. Women couldn't vote. Women were legally chattel. They were owned by their husband or their parents. I mean, these are kind of unthinkable today, but it was just barely over 100 years ago that they existed. And I think society is changing for the better. But part of its change, I believe, is that people are opening up to inner experience. They're opening up to finding their happiness within, and they both go together. The more we find happiness within, the more our vibration changes the people around us, and therefore the world around us. So we're slowly transforming the world just by choosing to give to the world something higher than what it is manifesting now. So it's easy to imagine at some point there could be the tipping point kind of experience where people accept that living from within is the answer, and not an oddity that their neighbor down the street practices, but that really is the solution. Meanwhile, we change the world with every uplifting thought we have. We change ourselves, we change our friends, we change everybody we come in contact with. That was one of the things that you often hear from near-death experiencers, is when they come back with this very heightened awareness that everything is like a knock-on. And whatever you say to somebody else affects them, and affects the person they see next, it affects the person after that they see next, and that there's just this huge reverberating energy working its way through what we think of as fixed reality, physical objects, when in fact it's very much energy vibrations radiating through all of that and through other people. So we can contribute to that, and should. Blesses us, blesses others.
Yeah, and even in terms of healing, in your book, you talk about epigenetics and how we used to think that our genes were set for life. We were born with, this set of genes, and it determined everything about us. And now we realize you have some examples in your book that are really eye-opening in terms of studies that were done. There's one, let me see if I can find it. There was one with a group of men who had prostate cancer, I think.
Yeah.
And they were able to, in like 3 months or something, they were able to change hundreds of their genes. Let me see if I can find it. Do you remember?
Yeah. So while you're looking, let me just
Mhm.
bring everybody else into this notion. So epigenetics was a discovery made really comparatively recently. And up until this discovery, it was believed that the genes that were active in our DNA were the ones we were born with and the ones we would die with. And that the whatever genes were activated was the hand that fate deals us. And it could result in brilliance, poverty, sickness, on and on. But this notion got kind of knocked to the side, to the wayside, by the discovery that parents were able to pass on changed genes to their children. So the genes they were born with were not the genes that they passed on to their children. And it became more and more known and proven that we change our genes that are active all the time. I didn't put this in the book, but it was fascinating to me that every night when we go to bed, we activate two genes that help us sleep, and we deactivate genes that keep us from sleeping, and then that flips in the morning.
Hmm.
And in a given month of normal activity, we might activate or deactivate thousands of genes. And we may activate it, then deactivate it the next day, activate it, deactivate it. They're very flexible. They very much a result of what we're thinking and believing and feeling. So they are the result, the deactivation or activation is the result of us, not the cause of what we're experiencing. It's just the opposite to the way it was assumed for decades. So some of the studies like Gloria we're talking about is that men exercising or people with various cancers would have their genes sequenced before they started. Then they would have their genes sequenced several times during the study, and then a final time at the end of the study. And they would find literally that they changed their genes thousands of times in just a short period of time.
I found the place in the book. It says, over the course of 3 months, a group of over 30 men with low risk prostate cancer following an intensive regimen focused on nutrition and lifestyle, activated 48 genes that help the body fight tumors and deactivated 453 genes that tend to promote tumors. And more amazing yet are the number of epigenetic changes made over a 6-month period in a Swedish study of 23 slightly overweight men attending spinning and aerobics classes twice per week. Researchers at Lund University discovered that the men had epigenetically altered 7,000 genes over 6 months. So
genes are the way I think of genes. The genes are a cookbook full of recipes.
Mm-hmm.
The DNA in the nucleus of your cell has all of these templates to make proteins.
Mhm.
And those proteins are good and bad. An odd thing about your cookbook is that you have recipes that will make you sick. You have proteins that will cause tumors to occur, and you have recipes for proteins that will reduce our tendency towards tumors. It's all there. And it's really the DNA in every cell in your body is only responding to what you want it to do. You may not know what it is you want it to do. You may not be aware that you're making these kind of choices, but the DNA is. And so if you are, there are people who are really, really ill, and they have a whole collection of illnesses. But if you really looked at their lives and could talk to them, you would find out they don't really want to keep living. They don't,
Mhm.
they're not happy. They're miserable. And so their body will obligingly accelerate the process so that they die. So your body will, again, obligingly do whatever you ask of it. It's got all the tools. It's got the DNA, it's got the energy, it's got the mitochondria, but it's listening to you. It's listening to your energy body and saying, "Ah, okay, well, you're miserable and you're mad and you're upset, so I guess we'll make you sick."
Hmm.
And it will. None of us are going to be consciously making that choice, but we're effectively making that choice. And that's part of the whole notion of taking charge of your health, realizing that if you are unhealthy, the chances are you've caused it. And you may say, "Oh, well, it's in my genes. I had a marker for such and such, and it caused this disease to take place." But it can just as easily be that that marker would go away and be another genetic marker for positive health take its place, be activated. It's all up to us. It's not easily up to us. I don't want it to sound simple and Pollyanna-ish, but I do want it to sound fundamentally true. We are in charge of our health.
Anyone else have a question? Carol.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Really, such a powerful. I want to read your book. I have not read your book. I have a couple of simple or little questions. I don't know. I have a couple of questions. I was very interested that you referred to the astral dimension as as two-dimensional, and so I thought, what would those dimensions be, here and now, or they're outside? How would you? That was one little question, and then the other question was the idea of matter and how it behaves. And I was thinking of David Bohm, right, in terms of the observer and the consciousness, right? And I think that you were perhaps similar to what you were just talking about, how the intelligent observer affects the matter. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So what I was wondering, is the phenomenon of manifestation a result of our being a witness or an observer of our vision? In other words, we that's why we materialize, because we are energy, and we are projecting this existence because that's what our consciousness, that's the level of our consciousness. If we're not at that level of consciousness, we wouldn't be manifesting. Does that make sense? Is that
Yep, exactly. I agree.
Okay, 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 good. Oh, I'm so happy to know that. Okay. So the two-dimensional thing, what would you say?
Well, in some ways, you can understand it more easily if you think about it in terms of just geometry. So the geometry of the physical universe has three dimensions. So, length, width, height, the classic.
Right.
And only because it has three dimensions does it create space, does it create distance.
Right.
Time.
So the astral regions have a kind of form, but I can't put it better than a quote from Sri Yukteswar, the teacher of Paramahansa Yogananda, who said that our astral bodies are coordinated images of light. So light has no spatial dimension. Light exists in only the two necessary directions of, length and width, or length and height. It only needs two for the energy to vibrate in.
Okay. Can I ask a quick question? So if I say the grid, does that make, in other words, if you are in a level of consciousness where you see a grid of light that's geometric, does that mean anything?
Yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying.
Okay. So would that be accurately describing an astral dimension?
Maybe in a abstract way, but I think the experiential way is that you see mountains and rivers and people, angels, and you see and recognize yourself as having a body. It's just gradually you realize that it's not the same kind of body. It's finer, it's better, it's purely energy. And that even though there appears to be distance, in the sense that you're seeing mountains in the distance, you're moving around in the astral regions is instantaneous. So in many ways, I remember a story of a near-death experiencer being toured around, sort of a common story told by many of them, and asked their guide, well, what is that? And he said, oh, that's, it was a building on a mountainside. And he said to the near-death experiencer, oh, that's a temple. And he said, well, can we go there? And they said, yes. And they started to walk towards it, but then they were there.
Oh,
So the starting to walk, I think of it as kind of like setting the intention. I want to be there, and then you're there. So they don't have to go through all that intervening apparent distance, because there really is no distance. So the grid may be a way to abstractly think of it, but I think experientially, many near-death experiencers say it feels much more real than the physical universe. It feels much more, me than the physical body does.
Mhm.
But it has this two-dimensional geometry. People often you'll read about spiritual explorers saying, I experienced. I think that is adding that to the three dimensions you're already in. And so you're experiencing a fourth dimension and a fifth dimension beyond these, but there are really only two more dimensions there. that can exist without the three dimensions of the physical universe. The physical can't exist without the energetic, but the energetic can exist without the physical.
Thank you.
Because the physical is a projection of the energetic.
Right. Right.
Well, what
Like
you said,
a hologram is projected, it's the laser makes it look three-dimensional, right? A holographic image, I mean. But
here in terrestrial world, it makes it look like it's three-dimensional.
yes.
Right. When it's just an image of light. So it's kind of almost the backwards principle.
and I love what Paramahansa Yogananda talks about so much is the cinematographic effect, right? He's talking all the time about the movies, right? The cinema, how the light is projected into the images.
Right. Yeah. And he uses that as an analogy and
A
says
wonderful
you
analogy.
look to the light. He used to say this was back when cinema projectors you could see this really obvious beam of light coming from them. But he would say, look to the light. That light has no form. It's just light. And yet it's intelligently coordinated enough to create an image on the screen. So we used to use that as an analogy for all of creation, that you have this intelligent energy as light that is intelligent because it emerges from God and then is projected into first two-dimensional form and then three-dimensional form.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Oh, I want to be sure that when we are talking about holograms and projections and three-dimensional and two-dimensional, we recognize they are still abstract metaphors. It's just a way for us to understand that there is the unknowable and there is the knowable with our senses. And so anything that is measured in the three-dimensional is possible because of our five senses. If we had different senses, then we would be experiencing the universe in a different way. So as long as we keep that in mind, that we are, dealing with abstract conceptions and we are metaphorizing, and it's really not as simplistic as this is two-dimensional versus this is three-dimensional. That's all, want to caution us, because the Western mind tends to see things in more concrete ways, and the Eastern mind is more symbolic, more intuitive, and that we must have a gathering place where both are still possible. And Mr. Selbie, I think your talk and your book allow us to do that.
Well, thank you. I mean, I think that there's always this, as you were describing it as, Eastern and Western, it even exists within the Western philosophies, and it exists within the Eastern philosophies. There's this divide between sort of a monistic, there really is only one reality.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing that exists and the only thing that matters. And yet there's also that recognition that the reality we experience is this cosmic creative light show that has a certain degree of reality, but not any ultimate reality.
And again, the word light is a metaphor. So
yes, that one of the hard things I find about monism as an approach to discussing reality is that no words are allowed.
yeah.
No words.
So
Words
you're
are
sort of stuck, any way you attempt to describe it, you're subject to it. But I think it also is deeply true.
That's why we have
Yogananda was not a monist in the way he taught. He was a dualist in the way he taught, and he said he chose to do it. Sri Yukteswar, his teacher, chose to do it in part because it was easier for the Western mind
Yes.
to appreciate it.
So what's next, Joseph? Are you working on another book?
I'm not. I'm enjoying having finished one. Takes me a long time to write a book,
Uh-huh.
and then this is a time when I get to be with people like yourselves to talk about it.
Yeah.
So I'm a kind of in between. I might create a course based on this book.
Oh, that would be good.
Would be a 7 or 8 or 10 episode kind of in-depth course, but that's still in the thought stage.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that would be exciting. You could certainly do that just on this one book.
Yes, now that's what I'm thinking. That it could be used that way, and would give me a chance to, there are sort of learning modalities. I'm sure all of you are familiar with this notion. But with a book, your learning modality is pretty much visual, or you're not learning. Where with a course, I could have visual, audio, and kinesthetic experiences for people, which would allow people to learn in different ways, and for some, learn even more as a combination. So I like the idea of being able to appeal to and help people with different ways in which they naturally learn.
So would that be a localized course or an online course?
Well, ultimately, it would be online. I may do it initially with an audience so that I can have an example group doing exercises and asking questions about them, and then use that as a recorded experience, and then walk people through it as they're watching other people do it. So it's all just coming together mentally at this point.
Germinating. Okay.
Yeah.
Shri?
Yeah. When you were speaking of epigenetics, in your opinion, how much of this base of knowledge that gene structure, gene regulation, gene sequencing can be affected by our intentions or lifestyles? To what extent is that coming into mainstream genetic research, in your opinion?
I don't know how to measure that or talk about it. I think there is a recognition now in mainstream genetics that attitudes and emotions do activate and deactivate genes. But I'm not sure they've gone any further than recognizing that they do. There's not a lot of research that I know of that connects the dots between having an emotion and the however many steps between that and a gene being upregulated or downregulated. I think they're just aware that there's a connection without any appreciation at this point in how that connection is made.
There may not be funding for that kind of research if the pharmaceutical companies have anything to do with it.
Yeah, and they may not yet know how to measure with Western instruments what is an emotion. You can measure electric firings and synapses going through the nervous system and in the brain, but how do you quantify even that as a particular kind of emotion?
Well,
and
to go back
what
to
I
the
believe
study,
the real cause is that your emotions are happening at the energy level and not primarily at the physical level. So
I was thinking about the study you have cited about the prostate cancer
Mhm.
men. So there must have been some intention there in the objectives of that research to look at diet, lifestyles. Perhaps they looked at intentions or attitudes,
Well,
or
I think
even to
they,
show
because it
that.
was a large group of people
Okay.
over a long period of time, 6 months,
Mm-hmm.
they could only make I'm sure there's a term for it, an aggregate opinion.
Okay.
These 23 men who did some degree of change of diet, exercise,
Yeah.
etc., had this number of epigenetic changes.
Mhm.
So you can't be very specific with that kind of measure. It's important because it proves that it happens,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Mhm.
you have to be able to have one person under close scrutiny for 6 months who goes through all those things and have some way of quantifying what emotions they went through,
Yeah.
or this kind of study to match up to moment by moment changes in their genes. And I just don't think Western science is able to do that yet. I don't even think it's close to doing that yet. I'd like to see it in time,
Mhm.
but I don't know that it's happening.
You have a research source for that particular study?
I have a end note for it
Okay.
Yes.
in the book. Pretty much all the studies, well, not pretty much, all the studies that I reference in the
Yeah, so
book
this must
are,
be a scientific study.
yes,
It
yes.
is. It is. I'm looking for, let me see, it was chapter 1, footnote 3. It says Ornish. Is that Dean Ornish?
Yes, that was that
Dean
story
Ornish
was taken
changes.
from Dean Ornish. But
Yeah,
the,
changes in prostate gene expression in men. Must have been an article.
yeah,
Mhm.
usually some scientific paper.
I'm sorry, I didn't read the whole thing. Changes in prostate gene expression in men undergoing an intensive nutrition and lifestyle intervention.
Mhm.
And then it says 8369-8374, page numbers
Yes, page numbers for that particular
study.
study.
Does
Mhm.
it give the journal or the
No, it doesn't.
Well, you can find it if you go to Ornish in the bibliography. You'll find
I
the
see.
Oh,
journal
okay.
reference. So you can find your way to the information you're looking for.
Right. So it's a
Yes. Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, Volume 105, number 24, 2008.
Okay. Right.
Mhm.
I think that's powerful right there.
Yeah.
You know, a lifestyle and nutrition, if that has already been shown in this small group of men, that it does activate or deactivate. And you mentioned over 7,000 types of genes.
Yeah,
Well, there are attitudes that are part of the lifestyle and the nutrition and the exercise.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so if we know that our genetic expression is malleable and flexible, then gives us so much reason to hope. It's just like the neuroplasticity. It's
Yes.
almost like a genetic plasticity.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
It
Yeah,
gives us
that's
a lot of
good
hope.
term for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Genetic plasticity. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, we read Bruce Lipton's book on biology of belief,
Right.
which
Right.
was all about that.
Mhm.
All right. Well, unfortunately, we have to wrap up. So I want to show you the book again. It's really, really good. The Physics of Miraculous Healing. And your website?
You can find more information at josephselbie.com. And the spelling of my last name is somewhat unusual. It's Selbie. The more common spelling is Selby. So Joseph Selbie with an IE.com. And you can find out about all my other books there. There are first chapters that you can read of pretty much all of those books. And there are other articles and that sort of thing. You can purchase the book if you haven't already, pretty much in any e-tailer from Amazon on. And as a special request, if you read the book and you like it and you'd like to leave a review or a rating on Amazon, it's much appreciated. Really helps.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Joseph, for spending this time with us and sharing all of this wonderful information that can help each person who hears it, I'm sure.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to talk about a subject that I
Thank you so much.
find inspiring and interesting.
And thank you all for attending. And we will see you hopefully next weekend. Next Friday, we have another event. Check out our website. You'll see all about it. All right. Thank
All right.
you.
Gloria.
God bless everyone.
Good night.
Good night.